and I wanted to pause and bring up Dr. Michael Heiser. So
Yeah.
Dr. Michael Heiser has been, for myself and much of the audience of my channel, a huge catalyst that helped us to understand exactly what we're talking about right here. I have a couple clips from Heiser going over some important facets that we just discussed. But
Awesome.
before we do that, I wanted to see, tell me, have you heard of Dr. Michael Heiser, and has his work impacted yours in any way?
Yeah, I know Mike, knew Mike like many of us did. Not terribly well, but he was one of my first. I was doing my master's degree in near Vancouver, Canada, and Logos Bible Software is just half an hour on the other side of the border down in Bellingham, which is associated with Lexham Press. So my I think I had some summer job. Like most grad students, studying the scrolls doesn't exactly pay for itself when you're that old. You got to find some work and. I got connected with Mike when he was still working at Logos, and he was doing some early work on what are now their Scrolls modules.
Mm.
And I think he needed a grad student Scrolls kind of lackey kind of guy to help move this thing forward. But he was super generous with me. I remember going down and meeting up with him and giving me a tour of what was in their campus kind of area in downtown Bellingham, and walking me through how they did things, what they did. And I remember sitting down with him and he was showing me how to tag text. And so, anyways, I did some kind of light duty summer contract work for them that, was, the first kind of olive branch someone gave me. And, we think you could do something with these texts and we want to have you down here to do some work. So I knew Mike a little bit through starting then. And, on and off over the years, our paths would cross, but it's been really cool to see. It was really cool to see how his openness to asking, frankly, I think what he would describe even as weird questions. He was one of his rules of thumb: if it's weird, it matters, right?
Yeah.
And he would open up some spaces that were maybe folks didn't feel safe they could ask the question, and he would, in a way, show that this doesn't have to be scary. In fact, it could be something really interesting to get into. So that's my kind of main Mike Heiser story, and to see his works, open up the types of conversations and experiences people had. It sounds like yours is one of them. It's just been really cool to see. So definitely he's missed. And I was super appreciative for him because he invited me into a space early on when I frankly had no idea what I was doing. And it was good to me with it.
Man, I have heard that story 30, 40, 50
I
times.
bet.
I mean, over and over again, from how gracious he was for bringing people in and just, whatever. Like, that's the sense of community that God put inside that man has helped more than just, yeah. So it's helped more than just the understanding of the Bible. I think it's just helped the community within the church, and it's helped me to learn how to be a better human myself. So I'm glad you shared that. That's really cool. So let's go to this clip, because I think it's important. I grew up with what you talked about, the golden tablet view of the Bible dropping out of the skies, and what we just talked about, I think this clip hits perfectly on. So let's watch it, and then we'll discuss together.
For sure.
Let's do it.
This is why they're important. All three of the textual traditions known prior to 1947, remember, that's the Masoretic text, the Septuagint, whatever the Hebrew was that underlied the Septuagint, and the Samaritan Pentateuch. All three of those text traditions were found in existing manuscripts at Qumran. So they actually did find Hebrew manuscripts that aligned with the Septuagint against the Masoretic text. So they found remnants of whatever the Hebrew Bible looked like that the translators of the Septuagint had to produce their translation. And they found plenty of text that aligned with the Masoretic text, and they found text that aligned with the Samaritan Pentateuch. They found all of it, all three of it. And they also found lots of texts that didn't match the other three. Those are called by scholars unaffiliated texts. So what this does is it shows us that at the time of Jesus, and some of these date to first and second century BC. Okay, the biblical material here.
I mean, I thought that just paired so perfectly with what we were just talking about. So before I say anything, respond to that clip.
Yeah, I'll just plus one the whole thing for the most part. Mike, what he hit on there is something that was really revolutionary for the scrolls. And I think he captured that in a way that was super accessible. I'm a little worried about the person walking around in that brick maze. Hopefully they found their way out. But the concept he talked about there, he used the word, I think he did plurality. That is so important for the scrolls and the Septuagint, because when we look at the families of texts, if you will, that are behind any modern English Bible, there's really going to be three main things. Again, talking Old Testament, New Testament is its own kind of ball of wax, but there's going to be the Masoretic text tradition, like Westhouse mentioned a minute ago. These are those texts like the Leningrad Codex and the Aleppo Codex. They're about 1,000 years old. They're fantastic. We would not have relatively complete Bibles without them. We absolutely need them. Then you wind back the clock further, we have things like the Septuagint, and this is that Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. Some of our best, complete witnesses are from about the 4th century of our era. So things like Sinaiticus or Vaticanus, Alexandrinus, I think those are all 4th century, or a few of them are. Then you wind back the clock, call it 400 or 500 years before that, then you get the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's kind of the ingredients in the mix for any modern English Bible. And if you don't believe me, go read your preface. Pay attention to the footnotes. Your translators will tell you this. They'll say, we did some homework on your behalf. Here's where we are pulling different details from, and here's how we're putting it together. What Mike hit on was that word plurality. You might say pluriformity. None of those things are the same. There's going to be important differences. So let's talk about one example. I always try to go, here's the idea, and here's an example of this. Yeah. I don't have manuscripts on my screen pulled up for this one because it might get a bit muddy, but we know those three traditions: Masoretic, Septuagint, Scrolls. We all know and love the book Jeremiah, right? Again, like Isaiah, arguably more so epic prophetic book of the Old Testament. Can't get away without it. You got to read it. Great stuff. When you look at the Masoretic text Hebrew version, that one that's about 1,000 years old, and compare it with the Septuagint version that is frankly as old or older than the Dead Sea Scrolls, depending when you date this, they're different in not just details like we were looking at before, but length. There's about 13% more text in one than there is the other. That's not nothing. That's a significant difference in length. So that length was a known difference. The Septuagint and the Masoretic text were pluriform. We knew that before the scrolls, because all you had to do was look at them, measure it, and go, there's more and less text in these versions. What we didn't know until we discovered the scrolls was that both of those versions were very ancient, because in Qumran Cave 4, we have two texts that reflect the shorter version and two texts that reflect the longer version. It did not seem to matter to the Qumran community. In fact, the fact that they had two copies of each, again, imagine I walk into your library and I'm going, you've got these two old editions of Steinbeck and these two new editions. You're going to go, yeah, I love Steinbeck. It's because those editions, the fact that they grew, developed, and circulated like that, showed that the message and the memory of the prophet really mattered. So that's where I think what Heiser was pointing at there, that's maybe an example of what he means when he says plurality. It's not this soupy mess of everything. It's actually to see where we have some of that diversity in text, in details, but in that case, like a literary edition, we have that with texts like Jeremiah. We have that with texts probably like Daniel, Psalms, Joshua. Odd to us because we're not used to thinking in those terms, but once we get into that space, it's actually saying something quite important.
Yeah, I love that, man. That really, it just helps us understand that we operate with such rigidity and strict just views of what the text is. And I just think this is so important for us, my audience, to understand when we approach the Bible on its own terms, that the authors of the book that you're reading did not operate in that same fashion. So I love that. So that fits perfectly with what we're about to explore through our next clip. With how the Dead Sea Scrolls impacted modern Bible translations, especially with the Deuteronomy 32. So let's explore this next, a little bit more of an extended clip from Heiser that goes over the debate of Deuteronomy 32 and see what we can discover together. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How does that sound?
That sounds awesome.
Let's do it.
Now, this is Deuteronomy 32:8-9. It is a reference back to the Babel event. What happens right after the Babel event when God divides up the nations? He calls Abram, and he creates for himself a new people and a new nation. They become his heritage. The question is, a lot of your translations, let's just go back, do not say this. Let's take a look at a few. Let's go look at King James. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, He set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Israel doesn't exist yet. Israel's not in existence when the nations are divided. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. New Revised Standard Version, NRSV, according to the number of the gods. Okay, so they're taking sons of God and pluralizing it, the number of the gods. So you get, a good bit of difference there, and you say, well, why the difference? Most of your English translations, at least kind of the older ones that have a little mileage on them, are going to have sons of Israel or a translation based on sons of Israel because that's what the traditional Hebrew text, the Masoretic text, has. But what the ESV team did was they made the decision, you know what, we are going with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is the oldest witness to this verse that is known to exist. So what we have going on here is we have a text critical issue. How did we go from B'nai Elohim to B'nai Yisrael? And somewhere, we don't know when this happened, but here's what a scribe did. You notice in green here, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, B'nai and then Elohim in green. Somebody removed these letters from the Dead Sea Scroll reading, and they inserted 3 new letters. They kept Aleph Lamed, El, got rid of what goes on the back, and then they added Yod Sin Resh to read B'nai Yisrael, sons of Israel. We know that it did because this is what the Masoretic text has, and this is what the Dead Sea Scrolls has. So if you're going with the text that is the oldest text that we have of the Hebrew Bible, you should be reading Sons of God in Deuteronomy 32:8.
We need your help. Ring Them Bells is a non-profit organization where every dollar donated goes right back into the mission of spreading the good news and helping those in need. The main ministry of Ring Them Bells is serving those in need in the name of our King Jesus. Over the past year, we have fed over 2,000 meals. And next year, we want to double that. We can't do this without your support. Everything we create here and all of the food that we serve is free because it's paid for by generous viewers just like you. If you feel led to donate and join the mission with us here at Ring Them Bells, click the Give Butter link in the notes and comments of this video. If you can't support us financially, please continue to like and share the content, as this helps us so much with spreading the good news about what Jesus has done for our world. Okay, so sons of God or sons of Israel? That is the question. I know what I believe. Andrew, respond to that clip and tell us your thoughts on how the Dead Sea Scrolls helped us better understand Deuteronomy 32.
I think Mike was doing his job of showing how important Logos Bible software is in that clip. I hope he got his cut on that. But he's, all joking aside, that's what those types of tools help us do, right? Whether it's this or Recordus or whatever. What I like about what he did there, so I haven't looked in detail this. I'd want to think through more, which would be more original? Is it different or does it matter? But the piece I liked what he was trying to do, again, not sure I'd have to think more about it, about how you get from one to the other is a question. But the thing I like what he's doing, and as we were watching, I was just flipping through my own resource here. He's absolutely right, and there's more. Remember, he said about both and. So he was talking about Masoretic text and scrolls. There's that even more to the story, because when we look at the Dead Sea Scroll he's talking about, it's 4Q Deuteronomy J, I believe is what he's talking about there, that has that reading, Sons of God. That reading, Sons of God, also shows up in the Greek Septuagint. So that suggests one of the kind of power duos that we have in text criticism, at least for my money, is when you got the scrolls in Septuagint, kind of hard to argue against it, because it suggests then that the Septuagint is not just making something up, it's translating an even older text that has the same reading as the scrolls. So there we've got a bit of a twofer. It's actually more than even what Mike was getting at there. Scrolls and Septuagint. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd be willing to say, like, that's you got to argue now against that. That would be one thing my first impression. On the other side of the equation, there's also more to the story, because the Masoretic text says Israel, like Mike was saying. The Samaritan Pentateuch, I was trying to listen, I'm not sure if you touched that on. Samaritan Pentateuch also has that same reading. So now this is like a tag team. We got 2v2 here, which is it going to be? There's ways of navigating this. I'm not sure I'd have to think more about the process he's talking about there. But our oldest traditions, I would argue, are scrolls and Septuagint. Really hard to argue against. The Masoretic, I'm not saying it's late. We just don't have an early manuscript like we have in the scrolls to say it's not original. Samaritan Pentateuch is also very important. We haven't talked about this. The Torah, Genesis to Deuteronomy. Samaritan Judaism has their version of the Pentateuch. One of the things the scrolls revealed to us is when you kind of take off some of the theological overlay to that text, it looks very similar to some of our oldest Pentateuch scrolls at Qumran. So like the Septuagint, the Samaritan Pentateuch now has that backstory. What I like about what Mike's doing is he's putting all the evidence on the table. He's not dumbing it down or saying, don't worry about it, trust me. He's saying there's more of a story here. And in true Heiser fashion, if it's weird, it matters. That's literally one of his principles. I remember from him saying, here, he's showing it might be a bit strange, but it also really opens up something that matters. How is it that these scribes are inheriting a tradition, understanding the tradition? Are they adapting it? And what is kind of the world around them or above them or whatever that they're trying to articulate? That I was reading that passage relatively recently, Deuteronomy 32. That language is very interesting, and that textual variant is a great example where one word can actually change a lot in how we understand the text. And I think he did a great job, at least, of getting most of that on the table. I've just put more wrestlers in the ring now to kind of fight it out, I guess. But I think he's definitely onto something in helping opening up those types of textual variants, because it's not just a potato situation.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that would be important for someone to do, like yourself, scholarly, when they approach this subject, is you're going to carry that through. If we have more biblical hyperlinks, both prior and after that verse, that connect the narrative stance for it to be sons of God rather than sons of Israel within the narrative. One of the things that really struck me, next week I'm interviewing Robert Alter, which I'm like, no offense, I'm
great.
super nervous about that one, but really excited too. Yeah. One of the things, he's really helped us all is understand the narrative structure of the Hebrew Bible and how, just insane the connections are in between everything. And, really, if you don't know the ancient languages, it's hard for us to pick up on these wonderful hyperlinks and connections that come through when you see the Bible as a unified, and I say Bible, Hebrew Bible, as a unified narrative. We as Christians know it's a unified narrative that leads to Jesus, but still, that's so important. And do you have anything? Because I was going to ask another question about Robert Alter, but
just you've got that book on your shelf. Go read that book, The Art of Biblical Narrative.
Yeah.
Money well spent.
Yeah.
And the one thing I love about his work is not only kind of the pieces you're touching on here, but his philosophy of translation, like reading the way he translates text. It has a rhythm and a cadence and a vibe to it that he's trying to invite you into that space. Like, here's how narrative and language work, and I want you to feel that as you're reading in translation. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll watch out for your interview on that with him, because he's a fantastic thinker, great writer. And that was one of the things took me a while to kind of stumble upon his work is, translation approaches. It's quite interesting and really cool to see.
Yeah, I love it, man. And connect those two dots with Heiser and Alter. A clip that I just saw from Heiser that I was looking for, where he says that it would be best if we viewed the Bible as fiction. Like, when we approach the narrative, it would be better for us if we actually viewed it that way, to understand it that way. And Robert Alter, one of the things I remember is 3-4 years ago, I won't forget it. When I read this sentence, it blew my mind, where he described the Bible as historical prose fiction, right? So we as Christians, we hear the word Bible and fiction, and we're like, no, and we get so upset. But when I really heard him out, and then I had other great thinkers like Heiser, like Tim Mackey, the Bible Project, and now guys like you, that helped me understand that like historical, they were trying to tell us about something that did happen in space and time, but the way that they used that was prose fiction, narrative fiction. Mm-hmm. And that's just a really important way for us to understand the Bible on its own terms.
If you have a sense that there's this stuff in the Bible, and surely this stuff in the Bible must be connected. I mean, this idea over here must have some relationship to some idea over there, but I can't see it. Again, you're correct. Your suspicion is correct.
The Bible is an intelligently designed, intelligently planned, intelligently executed thing. Okay, God knew what he was doing, and he picked the right people and prepared them providentially for the task, and they did a good job. But the connectivity that they both articulate in writing and that their original readers would have picked up just like that is invisible to us. And that's a problem because we can't see the layering of the story. We don't know what's in the foreground and what's in the background. We don't really know how an idea is propelled from Genesis to Revelation. We can't see the trajectories. We can't see the threads. We can't see the breadcrumb trail because the Bible typically is taught to us like we're reading a textbook. Here's a passage, here's 3 points in a poem, memorize the 3 points and you got the lesson for today. There's no effort at connecting it to anything else. And every passage of Scripture doesn't just connect to one thing, it connects to a number of things. Again, it's intelligently planned. This is why I tell people that they would be better off if they read Scripture, they read the Bible like it was fiction. It's not fiction, but it's a good exercise to read it that way. Why? Because you know when you read a novel that the writer is intentionally trying to do something to you. You can read a conversation, you get a bit of dialogue, you get a scene, you get a car, you get this or that place, and you know instinctively, because you're reading a novel, that, I'm going to see that again. I was supposed to see that and think this thought. Is the writer leading me in the right direction or is it misdirection? You know that the writer is doing something to you. And so your senses are alerted to reading whatever you're reading, the novel, like that. We don't read the Bible that way, but we should, because that's the way it is put together. So, I want to try to provide a framework for seeing the connectivity, seeing the story, and focusing on the story from the specific perspective of the ancient writers, not us, not anything modern. That's what I'm trying to do in Unseen Realm. And when we do that, we get a framework for everything. Now, Unseen Realm isn't a theory of everything. All your questions aren't going to be answered. But it will give you a framework. It will build the matrix, okay? It will start building the mosaic. Whatever metaphor helps you, please use it. It will do that. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You will be able to read Scripture and start to be oriented by the framework. Okay, I read this. Is this what's going on over here? Is this part of this, this part of the bigger picture? Yeah, it is. It really is. Good that you picked up on that. You'll be able to start to do those things. So, the fundamental problem that I'm trying to get after saying all that is that we have a problem being able to read the Bible the way it was intended to be read. And if we can do that, we will understand it more fully. We will get an appreciation for the easy things, the core ideas that anybody can pick up a Bible and get, like who Jesus is and what he did. You can, you'll still be able to get that, obviously, but there's so much more going on around Jesus as a person and the whole trajectory that if you can sort of have this mapped out in your head, there are lots of passages that are going to make sense to you that never did before. And you'll see how they relate to other passages. And so